Thank you so much for joining us with today. So today we are coming with another webinar session with ISC2 Ireland chapter. So today's topic will be balancing IT and business risk in large-scale transformations. So today's speaker will be Dwayne Harvey, Director Technology Consulting from EY. So with further ado, I would like to hand this session to Dwayne for his expert knowledge to share with us. Dwayne, over to you. So let me share my screen. So before we starting, just a disclaimer. So we will be live on LinkedIn as well as YouTube. So there will be a recorded session will be up in our YouTube channel for educational purposes. Just a disclaimer before we start anything else. So Dwayne, the stage is yours.
Thanks, Anish. Appreciate it. I'll just wait for the slides to come up.
2 seconds. Hope everyone can see the slides.
Perfect. Thank you. So before I get into the agenda, just a short introduction for myself. I have been in the industry for 25 years, 10 years as a technical specialist and architect, before moving into program management and, over the course of the last 15 years, delivering large-scale projects, programs and portfolios of change across different industries and sectors. The intent of today's session is to share a couple of examples as to how you can manage both value and risk in large-scale transformations, with specific examples of where you need to balance the IT risk against the business risk throughout the program or project lifecycle. If you could jump to the next slide, please, Anish. So with respect to the agenda today, really we're going to zoom in on 3 actionable frameworks. Most of what we do day to day is driven by methodologies and frameworks, but in addition to that, it's about sort of getting the basics right and really sort of delivering with rigor and discipline on large-scale transformations. And I'll show examples of how to do that. A lot of it is going to be very much data-driven to manage and mitigate that risk. As part of the discussions, I do encourage people to jump in with questions, and we will leave a placeholder at the end for any Q&A. You go to the next slide, please. Thank you. One thing that hasn't changed in the IT industry since I've been part of it over the last 25 years is the pace of change. In the noughties, we saw virtualization coming in at the infrastructure layer, and that allowed us to sort of consolidate the number of physical systems onto virtual platforms. Then there was the emergence of cloud, and that drove additional migrations and transformations for IT services supporting different businesses. And now we're seeing AI and data as being a really, really big driver within the industry. In EY, for example, we have over 300 people in our AI and data practice. Where I sit in EY is part of technology consulting. We have over 130 project, program and portfolio managers on my team. We deliver change across both the public and private sectors. And the majority of the programs and projects we're working on are delivering at a national or a global level. So we really do have a very strong team with a whole mix of experience, and that helps us, support our clients' needs. To the next slide, please. With respect to turning some of the lessons I've learned over the years into practical and actionable frameworks, it really is about 3 simple things. The first one, flawless execution of the basics. Now, many times people forget about doing the basics really, really well. But if you start there, if you build that solid foundation, if you apply best practice to what you do day to day, and ultimately if you monitor and control the risks through the full life cycle of a project or program, you're going to minimize the number of risks and issues, but also those nasty surprises that can jump up and impact your schedule, your scope, or the quality of what you deliver. And one of my favorite phrases when we're training new project managers or people who've come into the industry soon, reasonably new, is to put out fires before they start. What that means is don't wait for something to become an issue. Identify the risk, agree the categorization of the risk, and then ultimately, what can you do to avoid that risk becoming an issue? More often than not, there are targeted investments you can make. And what that does is it allows you to avoid risks becoming issues. It's as simple as that. And more often than not, if you go in and look at RAID logs and risk registers, there will be a lot of qualitative risk assessments in there. But how often have quantitative methods been applied to identify those risks, profile those risks, and ultimately take action in a proactive manner to control them? And last but not least, with respect to data, everything we do nowadays is with data, and that's not new. That has been the same in all large-scale transformations I've managed in the last 15 years. If you don't have good data, you can't actually truly understand the risk profile. And for the larger transformations as well, you're not talking about risk registers with 20 or 30 or 40 risks. You're talking about hundreds of risks that need to be monitored and controlled and regularly updated throughout the life cycle. And one important point that I would like to share with people is it's not good enough for a project or program manager to just control the RAID log themselves. It is very important that those risks are socialized through governance and with leadership that are responsible and accountable for those risks, especially out within the business, and that you agree with them directly exactly what measures are you going to take to control that risk and avoid it becoming an issue in the future. To the next slide, please. The first case study I'd like to share with you, this one goes back approximately 15 years ago, where we had to do a major refresh of IT service management software. Now that was impacting 15,000 servers globally that were responsible for hosting approximately 6,000 business applications. Because this was all part of a global ICT outsourcing contract, then we did need to make sure that the availability, reliability, and performance of the underlying infrastructure met the business needs. And we were spanning 4 different business units from upstream to downstream within the oil and gas sector. What that means, if something goes wrong on the infrastructure, a trade for oil cannot go through, or a ship cannot leave a port, and it has massive impact on the business. It's not always visible when we're delivering IT transformations. What is that impact on the business? But you do need to understand it and make sure that you can take appropriate steps to control the risk and manage it in a proactive manner. How we did that in this program is in 3 simple steps. Number 1, we phased the implementation and the rollout of the changes. What that allowed us to do is to assure the quality of what we had built and avoid failures through monitoring, reporting, and other agents used for discovery to pull through the data in the right way at the right time. A really strong area of focus for us was software license management, as if you don't have good data for IBM, Microsoft, Oracle, and other software vendors, then you're going to have trouble when it comes to renewing and doing true-ups for your annual licensing and your maintenance and support. To mitigate the risk and to allow us to control the change across the wider estate, we did have 64 different KPIs defined, and those KPIs were pushed out to operational leads on a weekly basis during the transition period in case there was a problem that needed to be resolved, it was resolved immediately. So that was really important in addition to the robust testing that we did all the way through the project. In order to develop the new capabilities that were built on top of the software, we used a mixture of Scrum for the automation team, and they were fed in a backlog of use cases to help automate processes and workflows across the wider estate, as well as Kanban for technical reporting, as we had 14 different CMDBs feeding in metadata from all different platforms and systems, and that data ultimately needed to be consolidated and usable across the IT operations team, as well as feeding into reports used during service delivery. With respect to the business risk that we had to mitigate, then there was always the contractual part of, are we delivering the services in line with what we have committed to delivering? And to give an example there, the monitoring agents that we used, as well as the discovery agents across the wider estate, we had a minimum SLA of 96% for uptime on those agents, with a target SLA of 99% that needed to be achieved. As part of the wider deployment, we were able to complete the rollout. We were able to make sure as well that where there were deficiencies within the enterprise tooling that we were rolling out, then additional software was rolled out on top of that to augment things like IBM subcapacity licensing or Oracle licensing that needed to be monitored with detailed reports provided back into the software asset management teams. At the end of the day, we were able to complete the rollout in a timely manner. There was no impact on the critical systems, and we were able to continue to drive value after the transition across to the new IT management software suite. Next slide, please. This next use case is more focusing on global automotive, and where they had decided to spin out one of the business units that was responsible for approximately 25% of their global revenues. The challenge here is that through a series of outsourcing contracts, they had lost a lot of knowledge that traditionally was in-house and spread across their existing IT teams. When we started the project, we looked at the application inventory, which was stored in a CMDB. Whilst approximately 90% of the application owners were populated, then it was closer to actually 60% of those that were accurate, and they all needed to be updated as a starting point before we went anywhere else and started to have discussions about splitting the applications across the new organization and the existing organization, as well as making sure that where we are capturing knowledge through those discovery exercises and through that engagement with the different stakeholders, that it would be retained knowledge that can be reused for future projects and programs. With respect to detailing out the risks that need to be mitigated, then we did have to define new standards for knowledge management. What is the minimum amount of data you need in an application inventory? And if the minimum amount of data wasn't populated correctly, then making sure that we had continuous monitoring in place with notifications to the responsible owners across 4 different business units so that we could capture that and pull it back in to the CMDB. Over time, we were able to increase the data quality in the CMDB, and that didn't just benefit this one project. It benefited all projects that followed it at a later stage. With respect to the business risk, there's a lot of challenges nowadays when it comes to data and data privacy. You can't simply clone applications and do a full copy of the data. You have to understand at an application level what data belongs to whom, and then ultimately make sure that that is being separated out across the organizations in a structured manner, and that you've got traceability in case you're subject to future audits and you need to demonstrate that the financials or other sensitive data has been managed in the correct way. The last item that I wanted to note about this project is really the stranded cost element from a commercial point of view. When you're spinning out and cloning so many applications, you have a number of challenges that you need to deal with. First of all, zombie hunting is what we used to call it, and that is application servers that have been orphaned as a result of the split. They're just sitting there, they're consuming licenses, they're accruing cost as part of your support contracts, and you go through an exercise of effectively completing screen tests to see if they're being used anywhere in the business before you turn them off in a structured manner. Also, application requirements become a priority, and you have to incentivize teams to suggest and support the retirement of those applications. Over a period of 2.5 years, we reduced the application portfolio by 10% globally, and we took out a corresponding amount of cost from that portfolio as well. Move to the next slide, please. Lastly, and more recently, I'd like to provide this example as it does give good illustration of what best practice looks like when it comes to managing risk in complex transformations that have to move at a very fast pace. Our team in EY were partnering with a health organization that had to notify 100,000 individuals that were impacted from an incident. As part of that, we had to build a custom application that would help to process sensitive data, forensically analyze that data, and then ultimately protect the data whilst the individuals were notified. That required only authorized persons to have direct access to the data. The project teams had no access to the data, but we did have to build the applications and the controls around the applications so that we could prepare notifications, send notifications, and manage risk at all time. Within one work stream alone, we had identified 135 risks that were managed within a 12-month period. Because we were very aggressive with managing our risk, we only had 19 issues that had to be resolved during the life cycle of that project. And we were using DevOps with automated pipelines, where regression testing helped us to complete about 250 SIT tests every time a change was made. And that allowed us also to reduce down the number of UAT tests that were being performed to approximately 70. And the DevOps pipelines were very helpful, but we also had to build governance around the project, where 100+ decisions from a design perspective were made by legal experts, data privacy experts, feeding into the requirements that the technical teams would take and then build into the custom application. So from an IT risk perspective, we were managing risk every day within the project. And ultimately, our primary goal was to make sure that people were notified in a secure manner without any sharing of sensitive data with unauthorized individuals. How did that help the client to mitigate business risk? Well, we had to provide an empathic service and maintain trust with people. We had different individuals, be it minors, vulnerable, or very ill people who were impacted as part of this. And the service that we designed considered all the different personas that we might need to notify so that the work was executed in an efficient manner, but also in an empathic way. In parallel to all of that, we did need to make sure that the compliance from a GDPR as well as NIS2 perspective to protect that data was being managed all the way through. And we did that with dashboards, automated checks built on standard tooling, mostly Microsoft DevOps in this case. The data itself was never visible to the team. That was only visible to the authorized subjects, but still we were all responsible to control that risk as well as engaging with the different stakeholders across the health service organization that needed to be involved in the decision-making process. Moving to the next slide, please. Thank you. So what does that mean for future projects and large-scale transformations? Going back to the 3 frameworks that I've suggested, building a solid transformation, proactive management of risk with a clear separation between what is the IT versus the business risk, and then using data to make informed decisions and engage with stakeholders in a structured way, then all of those things can be done across large-scale projects and programs in the future. It helps to drive innovation and the risk controls that you need to develop innovative solutions and roll them out. That should not be an afterthought. That needs to be considered from day one. We do a lot of that with automation, as given the complexity of these projects and transformations, you will never have all the capacity you need to do the work manually. As part of that, you should be building in triggers, alerts, and monitoring to tell you when risks are becoming issues and to help drive continuous improvements that go ahead in parallel to the deployment of different releases. Secondly, then, with respect to proactive risk management, this is something that I've always been a strong advocate for. It's not good enough to wait for a risk to become an issue. You need to understand what that risk is from the start. And if you do so, then you'll minimize the number of issues that you have to resolve throughout the life cycle of a large-scale transformation. With the adoption of cloud-based collaboration tools, as well as a strong focus on knowledge management, you can mitigate a lot of the people risk, and you can enhance communication across large teams that are typically 100+ people that are spread globally on these types of programs. Also, with respect to risk analysis, you do need to take the approach of understanding what the most critical risks are, make sure that they are time-bound, and take steps in a proactive manner to avoid them becoming issues. Governance is important there, so the more that you can signpost those risks to senior leadership and indicate that support will be required to avoid issues, the easier it is to get funding or what other support you need in the way of resources to manage the risk profile of the transformation as well. And lastly, with the adoption now of AI tools and advanced analytics, it really is down to having good data at all times. If your data is not good, you're not going to be managing the right risks, you're not going to be avoiding issues, and ultimately, from a compliance perspective, you're not going to be able to demonstrate and that you've done things in the right way and that you've got traceability in case there's a future audit that you need to share your reports with. Next slide, please. So that's the 3 use cases and frameworks I want to share, and now I'd be happy to open up the discussion.
Thank you so much, Dwayne. I think Kevin, we have Kevin's hands up. Kevin, do you want to go first?
Dwayne, thanks very much for that. It was great. I've been involved in projects where risks are detected late, like the risk register becomes a sort of a tick box exercise. And as a result of that, things pop up very late in the day, too late to avoid problems. And I was wondering if there are any ways, even with the right tools and the right software, would you have seen that in your own experience, and are there any ways to avoid that?
A lot of projects, I suppose, treat risk management as just a bolt-on. What you need to do is you need to think of your risk register as something that gets reviewed and signed off during each phase. And step one, similar to security and managing your cyber risk, is doing an assessment when the project has been initiated and as you move through your plan and design phase. At the end of plan and design, you should have a fully populated risk register before you move into build and test.
So it has to be a living document and not a static.
Oh, it has to be updated every week. And one of the little good habits the project managers that work with me and the teams that work with me adopt is every time something is updated, we initial it and we put a date stamp on it. And it avoids the data becoming stale.
Okay. Thanks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Kevin. Any other questions from the audience? Anyone who we can write back to Dwayne as well if you have any questions offline, so it won't be a problem. All right, we have another one. Go ahead.
Hi, Dwayne. My name is Bhagirath. Thanks for that. It was very helpful. I just have a question on data, right? So to collect data is a continuous process. So what point do we draw the line that this data is enough to decide or make a decision?
Good question. When it comes to managing risks, it's fair to say that most of the data you're dealing with is unstructured data. However, you can't manage the complexity of large-scale transformations without a very strong and robust approach to managing the risk, where you're able to mature each risk and how you identify it, how you assess it, and then ultimately how you quantify mitigating that risk over time. In order to do that, you really have to drive the standards within the team. And that can be one person within the team who is the standard setter, or it can be a PMO who's doing regular audits of the register and asking the hard questions back into the team.
Understood.
And just to add a small thing to that question, I think probably if you don't collect. Simple. keep it simple.
Yeah.
There is definitely, there's an element of, sort of garbage in, garbage out when it comes to all things data, and that applies to a risk register as well. If it's not being managed correctly, you'll notice, because the project status will not align to the reality on the ground. And I've taken over a lot of red projects and programs over the years. One of the first things I will always look at before I even look at the plan is I will look at the RAID log to check if it's being managed correctly.
Understood. Yeah.
Any other questions from the audience? Just a quick one, Dwayne, for me. What's the hardest project that, in terms of the transformation so far, that you encounter, and then why? If you can give a quick tips.
Probably the hardest transformations to
So
manage.
From your experience, you bring.
The hardest ones are where there's organisational resistance to the change. And that can also be compounded by limited or a lack of resources. When you have a dedicated team and everybody has a shared objective, and so that they all know exactly what needs to be done to get a result, then most of these large transformations are fun. But if you're fighting all of the way due to constraints and politics, it does take the fun out of it.
Sound. Anyone else from the audience about any other questions? Or you can write to us from ISC2 Ireland chapter, or you can connect with Dwayne on LinkedIn, so you can reach out to him or us, so we can route through the right path, I would say, so we can get the answers for all your questions. If you have anything else more, let's give a couple of more seconds. Any questions from the audience? All right, I'll take it as a no. Thank you so much, Dwayne, for joining us today. So it was a well-structured and plethora of information on the table to think in terms of the large-scale transformation, and it's really informative as well. So I think our audience is also learning something from this webinar. That's the ulterior motive from our ISC2 Ireland chapter, to educate all the people who are interested on these topics. So thank you so much again for joining us today with us. So have a great evening to everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks all.